So that being said, I'd like to introduce our first keynote speaker, who we're thrilled to have here today. Our first keynote speaker is Brewster Kahle, and most of you may have heard of his name, may know him. I went on Wikipedia just to make sure I had the right person. And Brewster is known as a digital librarian. He's been involved with information technology for many years, and he graduated from MIT, I believe, in '82. Is that correct? Yeah. And he was an early member of Thinking Machines. He invented WAIS, Wide Area Information Servers, which is, just as a tangent, FreeWAIS was one of the first tools I installed on a Linux system back in the, I won't say which 90s, but somewhere back in the 90s. And he also, of course, is the founder of the Internet Archive as well as Alexa Internet. Brewster's also a board member of electronic EFF, and has been involved with a number of activities related to libraries, information technology, and the promotion of information as a free and available resource. He's done a number of wonderful things, and Brewster's going to talk to us about the Internet Archive, Open Library, and other various efforts surrounding that today. So please welcome Brewster.
Thank you, Jeremy. This is great. I came in last night and the receptionist said, "Who are you guys?" You filled up all of Embassy Suites and it went and spilled over. So this is a great gathering of basically the geeks of the library world. So I'm feel great to be here. And it's I think that we've got a great opportunity now to sort of go beyond what it is we normally do, which is, well, we're kind of friendly people, we kind of work on our systems and we try to do exchanges. I think we can do something more and actually build a great digital library together. So I'm going to basically give a sort of idea of a little bit of overview of sort of the Internet Archive and some of the things going on there, but really spend most time on sort of how might we really work together to build something great. We come from a great tradition, and I think the library metaphor idea works really well on the internet. We're paid to give stuff away, right? So it works well in the internet infrastructure towards making this work. And you know, people are paid. I think in the United States it's a $12 billion a year industry. $3 or $4 billion of that goes to publishers' products. So it's not like we're pirates, as Pat Schroeder of the AAP went and called us once. No, we're actually, we support a large part of the publishing infrastructure. And I'm not suggesting that we actually spend less. I just think we should spend our money better. I think we could go and work and build a system that in this digital age would really be killer. And it would come from the public sphere. So anyway, so that's the overall idea of what's going on, and I'm going to try to basically build around that and try to show or work with sort of the whole community to figure out how do we go and build basically the digital library we've always dreamed of. The library It turns out that even a small organization as ours, and therefore probably yours, you can start doing comprehensive collections. The question is sort of how big are these collections, and how would you be able to go and do some of this stuff? Most people think of audio as published discs, 78s, long-playing records, or CDs. And there are only 2 to 3 million of them. So it wouldn't take actually very much of that machine cluster to go and store all of the published music and disc recordings over time. But it's unfortunately quite heavily litigated. So we started to try to find what are the areas that we could go move forward on without having people come down on us in nasty ways. So we found there are lots of niches that aren't served very well by the classic publishing industry. I mean, we really don't need Madonna's newest CD. Right? We really want a much broader breadth of materials for people to learn from. And we're finding that there are lots and lots of communities that want to get up there and out there. And just as an example of where
our role is working fairly well is with the rock and rollers. The Grateful Dead started a tradition in the 1960s of allowing people to record their concerts and trade them with each other. And it used to be that you could tell how, awesome a Deadhead you were by how big your collection was and how close you were to the masters. And some of us, probably more than us than we want to really admit, have some of those cassettes sort of stashed away. And this tradition of tape trading caught on. Lots of other bands started doing this. And an intern was working at the Internet Archive, working on the website one summer, said, I was involved in this tape trading thing. And I said, oh yeah, I remember that, barely, from my days. And he said, it's still going on. So he said, why don't we go and offer to help host their concerts? Because they're having real trouble. They have the databases online, but they don't actually have the concert recordings. They don't believe in lossy compression because of the tape loss problems over the years. So they're big. So he said, all right, well, why don't we write to their mailing list? So we went to the eTree mailing list and said, would you like unlimited storage, unlimited bandwidth forever for free? So they wrote back and said, we don't believe you. But if you can do that, it would be our dream. Always a good sign when somebody says it would be your dream. So he said, all right, let's try. And it's a little bit different from tape trading. So he said, let's get some kind of okay from the bands. And so we got some kind of okay from the bands saying that they were taper-friendly bands. And somebody said, yeah, this is within our general idea of a good time. It can be up on archive.org. We're getting 1 or 2 bands a day, about 30 or 40 concert recordings a day. We're around 40,000 concerts now, about 2,700 bands. It's working. All in all, the community is building some of the best metadata I've ever seen. I mean, if you want to know exactly who was playing on that particular Casey Jones from 1982 in Providence, it's there. Anyway, so it's beautiful work supported by a community that is really building up this collection. So we're starting to also digitize discs, and it costs about $10 to digitize a long-playing record. Of course, a CD, you can't not rip a CD if you put it into a computer, but in the discs are sort of doable at large scale. And so it's starting to work. So we've got a couple 100,000 items and 100 collections, including things like radio programs like Democracy Now! and other folks that are using us basically as free hosting. So another role for we libraries, I think, is kind of as dumb back-end storage. So like Democracy Now! Has their own web page. So if you go to their web page, which is where you'd go for Democracy Now! You wouldn't go to archive.org for Democracy Now! You'd go to their web page, and then if you click on it, our disks spin. There's a little thank you button on the bottom, but that's it's not all regulated and branded. It's just sort of please use us, please put your stuff into the archive and make use of it during its sort of current use. And we're seeing that this type of thing is going pretty well. So audio is doable. Moving images. So the idea is how hard would it be to do all moving images? Well, how many are there? If you think about the feature films, there are only about 150,000 to 200,000 of them. They're really expensive to make. I hear that about half of them actually are Indian. So anyway, there's not that many theatrical releases. Most of them are under copyright and fairly heavily exploited. So we've only gone and gotten about 1,000 that were sort of explicitly out of copyright and put them up at DVD parameters and a bunch of other parameters. So it's a large cineplex of sort of B movies. So if you're ever sort of bored or want to see an old Western or things like that, some of it's good. Day of the Dead is good. But most of them are kind of, they're not these movies. They're other movies. But it allowed us to get going and try to figure out how hard was it to go and put these sorts of things up. And what we found was really actually popular to people were movies that they couldn't get any other way. It's the things in our archives. We got a collection of old 20th century films that were things like government films, old advertising, old training films, those old social behavior films. It was the things that in junior high school you saw when you had a substitute teacher. Those, all right? The physics guy with the flat top and telling you how it is. Those. Anyway, these things are fantastically popular. I don't know why. It might be because YouTube just isn't really that great either. But I think it's somewhat kitsch. I think it's also people trying to get an idea of what the world was like then in a visual way. A lot of people are downloading them because they can cut and paste them and make their new things out of them. So it's a public domain collection, which is fairly hard to find out there. And we have these in our libraries and archives. And what we found, it wasn't that expensive to put this stuff up, and it's fantastically popular. We also made an offer to people to go and put up their, whatever it is they want. It was sort of YouTube before YouTube. And we'll take very long things as well as sort of the 5-minute clips. So debates and lectures and things like that. And you guys probably have a closet full of videotape someplace that's waiting to go online. Maybe somebody's going and saying, well, we're going to have to go and get, release forms from all these dead people and heirs. I'm like, no. Put the stuff up and be responsive. If they want to take it down, take it down. And it seems to work really, really well. And we've gotten the whole digitization process to be very inexpensive, and I'll hit that in a moment. But there's also all these new types of movies that are coming up. Like, you see the little picture of the Lego guy? Who'd have thunk it? There's a whole genre of Lego movies. This is where you have a digital camera and you take a picture of your Lego guys, and then you move it slightly and take another picture and take another picture, and you can make your Lego guys walk around, and you can put voices on them, and it's a genre. Well, anyway, they found us because of our free storage, and they started putting these things up, and it's really worked as a collaboration. So we as a library are supporting a community that had no home before. And they were basically dumbing their videos down to really low res because they couldn't afford the storage before. And so we in the library world were funded to go put things on shelves and give them away, right? That's what we're here for. So why don't we go and offer it to other original materials that are of different types of communities. Also in the moving image area, there's television. So the Library of Congress was supposed to start doing large-scale digitization, and they just never did. They're doing it in selective parts, but they're not. In 1976, I think they got the exclusive right to go and do certain things under some law. And what they did is, 20 years later, is they wrote a report on why they weren't doing it yet. And it's like, no, come on. And so anyway, so we at least said, let's hit the record button. So there's this really amazing MPEG-2 guy in Maryland who is recording 20 channels of television from around the world, DVD parameters, 24 hours a day. So it's basically, let's get going. And so it's a big TiVo box. And it's now, I don't know, a petabyte and a half of stuff. So it's not that much, considering that it's basically 8 years of television of 20 channels, DVD parameters. And it's basically being recorded away. We've only made 1 week available. It's basically September 11th to September 18th, 2001. What did the world see? Television is a very important medium, right? We all know that. But you can't critique it. To be able to critique something, you need to be able to see it again and compare and contrast. But it's very difficult to do that. You can't really do that. Also, I think we're learning, especially in this country in the last election, that news comes with a point of view. That if you just watch one news program, even though they're saying it's fair and balanced, it's not necessarily every point of view you might be seeing. So you want, and you don't want just Jon Stewart being the one that sort of, is your librarian critique of going and comparing this stuff. So let's at least record this stuff. So so the idea is putting up news is now sort of within our grasp, and we'd like to do more of it, and could use some real help in that area. We've got at least the collection. So putting all moving images up is doable. It's about $15 per video hour. If you have videotapes in your closets, send it to this guy in North Carolina, $15. They'll send a hard drive back to you or a hard drive to us, and we'll host it forever. So it's cheap, right? 1,000 hours of lectures or whatever it is you have in your closets. Please, let's put it up and show that the library world is putting these things up for everybody out there. And we've got, I don't know, 50,000 videos or whatever. No, I think I'm corrected. It's 100,000 hours of all these different types of movies that are now up there on the Internet Archive. Software, there are only 50,000 titles. It's mostly legal issues and also labor to go and rip these things. So we've got these large collections of software. But the idea of building universal access to everything ever published is now crossed the threshold towards people saying, yeah, okay, that's doable. The idea of doing the whole darn thing is within our grasp. Usually we're just sort of, peddling and trying to keep our own little pieces going. But if we actually think about the whole thing, sometimes some things get easier. So I'm trying to establish that that's generally possible. The Internet Archive is a component of it, but don't wait around for the Internet Archive. It really needs a much broader impetus. And towards that, I'm going to spend the rest of the talk talking about texts, because I think this is our opportunity, and it's actually a hinge point in history. We've got in our charge is sort of to keep track of the books, the journals, and also everything else. But really, the core of a library, Libri, is book. So if we lose books from our domain, we actually could not get it back for decades or centuries or ever. So I think we in the library world have got to work really hard on texts. If we look at journals, we basically handed it to a couple of large corporations, and now we have to rent them back from them. And there's sort of this idea that, oops, that was sort of a mistake. We shouldn't have done that. Now we should do public library science and reinvent the whole journal publishing and have everybody publish new things on a new way, But if we'd never let it happen in the first place because we'd produced good enough services, or we'd kept copies for ourselves so we could produce services as well as having the commercial guys go and do it, we wouldn't be stuck here. And what's happening right now around monographs, books, is the same kind of thing is going on. There's a couple options, and of course, I've got a horse in this game, but need some help. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about what should we do about texts. Well, how many are there? If we wanted to go and put the whole thing online, there are 26 million books in the Library of Congress. And a book, if you just take the words in it, a Microsoft Word file of a book is about a megabyte. So 26 million megabytes goes mega, giga, tera, is 26 terabytes. 26 terabytes fits in Linux systems that would fit in this podium, right? And cost about $60,000. For the cost of a house, or in San Francisco, the cost of a garage, you can have all of the computers spinning with all of the words in the Library of Congress, right? For $60,000. So, the cost of basically a man year. So you can basically go and think about doing the whole thing. But then we need to go and put some user interface on this. And I'd say the big opportunity for us is building one web page for every book ever published. We really need to bring these to people. We've been doing digitization projects in our libraries for a long time. They're kind of stuck in these miscellaneous websites and behind something or other with some, arbitrarily indifferent user interface, and then the project gets defunded, and there it is. And so we haven't gotten really a system for going and getting books. And of course, once you do books, then we could do other things as well. But I think a good one to start with is books. One web page for every book ever published, I think, would be a great goal for a set of services that we could go and build up in fairly short order. What would it take to do this? So let's say this is our charge. We as a community are going to build a set of websites. It has to be web services and the whole thing. What would we have to do? One, we'd have to go and scan, a whole heck of a lot of books. And also the catalog data. So we started at least trying to get the book systems going. We work with the Million Books Project. We shipped 100,000 books to India. And the thing we learned out of that one is don't send your books to India. Have the Indians scan the books that they really like, are interested in, and also the Chinese did a great job of scanning their books. But basically, you should scan your own books. You might want to trade them in digital form, but the idea of shipping the books around, at least for us, didn't work very well. So we ended up building our own scanning system to try to get the labor costs down so that it could be done at 10 cents a page. And it's basically this sort of scribe thing with 2 digital cameras. There's a book that's held like this so it doesn't break the spine. We raise and lower glass to go and flatten the page, take 2 pictures, raise it up, And a person does this. Turns the page, raises, closes, click, click, raises the glass, turn it, click, click. And we tried the robots, and they didn't work very well. They might be getting better by now, but the idea of doing that at large scale was too expensive and too unreliable. It was in our experience. So having actually people go, and I believe this is the librarian from Brown, no? Well, anyway, trying out a scribe in the new Boston Scanning Center. This is what it looks like at University of Toronto, where we have 10 scanners running 2 shifts. We can do 1 million pages a month out of one of these scanning centers. We're scanning at about 15,000 books a month now across 9 different centers. And we're going at 10 cents a page. So the idea of basically the cost of Xeroxing a book, Xeroxing a page at Kinko's, you can digitize a book, digitize a page, OCR it, put it in several different access formats, put it on multiple computers, multiple continents, add MARC records so that they're basically cataloged, harvestable through OAI and the like, 10 cents a page, and we can do this at very large scale. So we're starting to get this sort of mass system going within the public sphere, right? This is not being done as a corporation. This is being done by us to basically make it so that we can go and we're free to give our books away. Isn't that weird? We need to demand the right to give things away, because it's starting to be that those that are doing some of these digitization projects are putting perpetual restrictions even on the public domain. And they're making it so that, yes, you can have access one at a time from their website, but the idea of doing bulk downloads or doing 100 downloads to go and do some research, not if they don't want you to. And the idea of the public locking up the public domain at this point, it's already too small. Right? So let's go and at least protect the public domain and start moving out from there. So we're starting to do some large-scale book scanning to be able to get this sort of thing going. We really need help here. We've now built up this infrastructure based on foundation funding, but the 10 cents, we don't have enough 10 senses, and we don't have enough good books. So please help support these scanning centers while they're running. Once they get shut down, it's very expensive to be able to start them back up again, and I'm not sure they will be. This is kind of our shot. So please take collections that you've got and have them digitized and start building some services around them. We've got about 250,000 books now in 8 collections. So it's going fairly well. So the first thing we got to do, if we're going to build one web page for every book ever published, we're going to have to scan a lot of books. So we're starting to do mass scanning. Just the idea of scan on demand might be kind of interesting. So take from your catalogs and put a button in there, which is if it's whatever factor you want, whether it's if you only want to do out of copyright, then put a button on them and say, scan this for me and deliver it electronically. Remember, 10 cents a page, 300-page book, it's $30. That's about the cost of doing interlibrary alone. Might as well scan it, put it on the net for anybody in the future. So one of the things we could do is the Scan on Demand program. We're starting to do this with a pilot program with the Boston Public Library to not only do it for out of copyright works, but also out of print works that get you very close to the current day, and loan them. Use interlibrary loan. I don't know quite what loan means in the digital world, but let's figure it out. Let's try some stuff out. I don't like digital rights management, things that melt, those sorts of things. It doesn't work very well. But I think that we have an opportunity here to do some programs, and you guys are in perfect position to start pulling some of this stuff off. So basically offering up the materials that are in the Boston Public Library, they'll run it down in their scanning center and get it to your patrons. That type of thing is now all possible. We just need to start to put some of the pieces together. Another aspect is we need open OCR. Right now we're using closed OCR, and it's pretty good, actually. The recognition rates are pretty good. It's pretty expensive to run. So that's one issue. But it doesn't handle a lot of languages. The New York Times said that a language is dying in around the world every 2 weeks. It's finally snuffing. The last light of a language is going out. And I think we're going to start to see an analogy of biodiversity with cultural diversity. And we may look back on this section of our history as not only having lost a lot of species, but having lost a lot of cultures. And we are the cultural institutions and the cultural memory organizations of the world. And if we can make open OCR work for 1,000 languages, I think we have a good shot at having 1,000 languages still be living in 100 years. So open OCR, and I've got some ideas on how to do this if people are interested offline. Another thing we can do, and we've set up systems to be able to do it, is let's scan all the microfilm. I remember an MIT librarian took me aside and said, Brewster, I hear about all this scanning stuff. We've done this before. We've heard this before. It's called microfilm, and we did a lot of it. And it was based on that conversation that we went and tried to figure out how inexpensively could we go with going and scanning microfilm. And we basically got it so we could do microfilm with the same thing, skewing it up, QAing it, the whole thing, for less than 10 cents a page. For less than 10 cents a page, we could do all microfilm, which is great. Newspapers look like it may be a bit more because of the OCR, but we're still trying to figure it out. But we're starting to do large-scale microfilm scanning that may be as much as 25 cents. But the Kahle Austin Foundation made an offer. They called it my name is Kahle, so anyway. So I made an offer. So anybody that would be interested in the Carnegie model, right? Trying to figure out how do you get it so that people can buy into this sort of thing. The idea of the Carnegie model, what Carnegie did really well is he signed people up that he'll build you a brick library if you'll stuff it with people and books. He'll do the capital costs. And it caught on like wildfire. So I thought, I don't know, maybe this would work in this case. What if the Internet Archive and Kahle Austin Foundation loaned a microfilm scanner for a couple years if whoever's the receiver would basically keep it running for 2 shifts for 2 years. Basically, just keep it running. And the Internet Archive will do all the back-end processing, all the OCR, all the hosting, whatever. So it's basically a no-cost thing, and except there's labor, and you guys have to put forward the film, but there's no money changing hands. And so these microfilm scanners are really pretty efficient, and we're starting this out. University of Illinois is already jumping in. There's a couple other. I think we're installing one at the Library of Congress and the like. So anyway, the idea of microfilm, let's just do it all. Right? If you've got theses on it, if you've got newspapers, let's at least go and take advantage of all that great work that was done over the years and get that stuff online. So let's scan a lot. Another thing we've got to do to build a one web page for every book that's worth using is we need better selection. Right now we're doing mass digitization programs of kind of whatever we're handed. But it doesn't mean that it's complete collections of anything. And we really need to go and make sure that these are good, solid collections so that we can go and introduce particular people to these. We've got 90 sponsored collections. We've got different ways of viewing it. We're using the MARC records, but we really need to make sure that there are particular communities that are served well by these collections. This is another area that I think we, in general, need help. Let's make sure, take a particular area of the digitized materials and the catalog materials to make sure that we're a critical mass in the digital world like we were in our libraries in the analog world. And what I would suggest also is think outside your own libraries, that the digitized materials may come from someplace else. We've been digitizing all these materials, and it's interesting. University of California only wants back the books that came from their library. It struck me as, what? Why? But I started to understand that they basically only see real responsibility for things that they own physically. And I think there's going to be a change here where you're going to go and say, what's my subject area that I'm going to try to make sure is represented well? It's engineering or agriculture or my part of Indiana, whatever it is. And be able to get the digital materials from wherever, collection of digital materials, kind of like we did collections of analog materials. And we may not end up hosting them. We just want to make sure that there's a good user interface to them so that the people that we're trying to serve can make access to it. So selection, I think, is an important part of this whole project. Then there's building a catalog. What we need is lots and lots of records. We need to then go and finally do this Ferber thing, right? Come on, guys. It's not that hard. You know, the idea of going and searching on Tom Sawyer and getting a scrolling list of 30 or 40 things is not what people are looking for. So anyway, so we need to actually go and get it so that we have made a hierarchical view of the works that are in our collections, especially as we're starting to collect scan many editions of any particular work. And we have to merge library and non-library records. For this, actually, we're making some great progress in the Open Library project. So the Internet Archive is helping build this Open Library project, which is, the tech lead is Aaron Schwartz. Is Aaron here? Not yet? I think he's going to be speaking on it. And we've got, I think, about 20 million records now. Library of Congress records, a couple of universities. And actually, I'd like to announce, this is an announcement here at Code4Lib. Talus is putting forward several million of their records that can be used in the public domain in the Open Library project and all projects. So hooray for Talus. We need more records, and we're starting to get non-library records, basically publisher records, and trying to put all of this together. The idea of one book, for a web page for every book ever published is not necessarily for every digitized book, but every book. And we may not have the digital version yet, so let's have some information about it. Let's link to the reviews that were published at the time. Let's try to put as much of this together as we can for all books ever published, not just the ones for sale, like in Amazon.com. So we're doing fairly well in terms of doing some collection, but we really need some heavy lifting by bibliographic programmers. The Internet Archive has got several positions open, including one for a bibliographic programmer. But really what we'd like to do is not hire them and have you guys do it within your own organizations. But if we can start to work on basically handling and building up a catalog system, that really is kind of what people expect, whether it's sort of like an Amazon.com or like a Wikipedia or a combination of the two. Something really great for current Internet users. This is our goal. To go and build a catalog to draw this next generation into these book collections in some interesting new way. Then once we've built some of this catalog, we actually need to have access to these books. And this is where I think we may be falling the most behind. We now have large digital collections. We have all these catalog records, but our displays aren't very good. So there's starting to be some displays. This is a screenshot of the Open Library site, which is one. There are a bunch of these that are starting to come out that are more web accessible. But we need open APIs. We need really great search. Search is not easy when you're dealing with full text of books. You know, it's easy if all the records are the same size, but it's not all that easy if you have very variable types of material and you're trying to search inside books as well. You need lots of different views. The idea that there's only going to be one website for this makes no sense. We want this information to be blended into the web and into other people's websites in all sorts of interesting and creative ways. Let's exploit that it's open. And let's have it be a wiki++, a structured wiki. And the Open Library project is doing this. It's gotten some funding from the California state libraries. The Moore Foundation, the Mellon Foundation have been helping in some of the peripheral technologies around it. So we're starting to get some momentum here in the funding community, and we need more work in the technical community to make this work. We've got a framework that can handle this many records and versioning them and backing them up and searching them, but we really need a bunch more help in this particular area. Displays of the books, then, there's searchable versions that are coming up now, flip books and the like, but they're really not good enough. We need zoomable interfaces that are based on open source software to maybe go and look at these JP 2000s and the like. I've also, we found that people like physical books. And the idea of printing books back out again is also quite doable. So we made a bookmobile. It's got a satellite dish on the top, printer, binder, cutter, and kids make their own books. And for a 100-page book, you can download, print, and bind a book for $1. At $1 a book, you can give books away. In fact, it's cheaper than loaning them out, according to a study done at Harvard of how much it costs them to loan a book and bring it back. And they come out with great-looking books. I brought some of them. And I put some stickers, some of the laptop stickers in them. but the idea that you can download, print, and bind books that have been done this way is now quite doable. This is Eric Eldred, one of the guys who's involved in a lawsuit to try to get the public domain from getting completely stomped. We lost that one, but that's with his bookmobile. There are a couple in India. There's one that was launched at the Library of Alexandria in Alexandria. This is sort of some shots of basically first day of basically a happy patron getting a book. This is the first book this kid ever owned. So the idea that in the developing world, this kind of delivery might get us the last mile. And we tried it even in rural Uganda, and it seemed to work quite well. There are now print-on-demand machines that are kind of kiosk-like, that are kind of this contraption that goes and prints it and then rolls it over and binds it and cuts it. It's really quite amazing to see. We've got one of these now at the Internet Archive as we're making a prototype open library. The idea of making a library that's the size of a mall slot, a 20 by 10, that you could put a library with a librarian and a good internet connectivity and a print-on-demand machine. The idea that you can have 1 million books in every mall, every school, every hospital, every retirement home is now within our grasp with this type of technology. I've also seen a bunch of people wandering around here with the one laptop per child machine, the XO. How many of these things are there out there? 1, 2. Anyway, they're completely great. They have a really good screen for displaying scanned materials, unlike the Kindle. The Kindle's really good for things where you have it in ASCII, but this thing works really well for scanned materials. And so we'd like to see better interfaces on that as an open ebook reader. So the idea here is to show that there's some progress going on, but I'm trying not to show that there's so much progress that you can say, oh yeah, okay, well I'll check back in a year. We actually have to work together on building this. And from something that really motivates me is the societal and political questions about what world are we building? How is this going to be done? I mean, there are others that know that this is happening, and they're more secretive about us than we are, and they're more closed about it. And there's right now kind of a race on as to what's going to happen to the library system. Is the library system going to really become mostly a collective bargaining organization for going and negotiating contracts with commercial entities for providing services through the web for our patrons? Or are we going to actually start building services that we operate in the digital sphere, beyond the catalog? That's a big open question. Is it going to be public, or is it going to be private? Is it going to be open, or is it going to be proprietary? Actually, it's not going our way, I would say, at the moment. But with groups like this coming together and some of the progress we've seen, I think we can actually pull this off in a very big way to have it go open. The big question, this is a wordy slide, but I think it's worth reading. What services will libraries perform, and which will patrons get from companies? Right? In this digital revolution, what will they get from companies or from public institutions that act like companies? I really like the rise of the high-tech nonprofits. And we have a certain set of credos, like we don't hoard stuff. Right? If you want a copy of Wikipedia, you can just download it. The Internet Archive books, if it's public domain, you can just download them and reuse them. The idea is to be able to make it so you can bulk repurpose these materials. That's what I think we really want, to be able to build some great services. Towards this end, the Internet Archive helped start an organization called the Open Content Alliance, which has now got about 80 libraries as part of it and a few commercial partners. The idea is to build joint repositories of digital materials. The eureka, again, for me, was Alta Vista. That going and doing federated search, which was what Waze did, which was this early publisher system, didn't work very well. We've never been able to get federated search to be anywhere as good as centralized search. But then you want to go back to the places that they came from. I believe that. But the idea of having central repositories so that we can do cool navigation services, next generation things, I think is going to be absolutely key towards building these things up. And we now have support of lots and lots of libraries from around the world that are interested in putting it forward, but we have a lot more services to do. At the last Open Content Alliance meeting, the big cry was for services layers. We're getting good enough digitization process now, but how do we go and make it so that we can deliver these services to end users? Conclusion. Working together, I believe we can build a great library. I think I would like to not have to build another large centralized organization, whether it's a Google or an OCLC or the like. Let's try this one in a distributed form. But it requires us putting serious time and effort in our day jobs to go towards building something together, which isn't easy organizationally. You're going to go back and there's going to be, the normal to-do list that you had before you left, and actually a few more things are going to be piling on. So how are we going to budget the time? I don't know. But if we don't do it, it won't be ours to do in this distributed way. And I think it would be really missing a very key value to supporting our intellectual history if it were done in centralized organizations, for-profit or non-for-profit. But we really need to have many different views of these materials, lots of different points of views and people pulling and tugging on it so that we have a diversity of views and approaches. So I have my wish list here. So please contribute time and code towards building these open source projects and collaborate maybe on the openlibrary.org project. That is one that's got some momentum. But there's lots of other pieces, whether it's Evergreen, Zotero, other projects that are trying to build up some of the infrastructure. Digital materials. If you have digital materials, please donate them and contribute them in some way that makes sense within your organizations. Catalog records. We need a lot more catalog records, especially if we're going to do scan on demand. If we basically want to reach into your library and say, you've got the only copy of this and somebody in Arizona wants it, can we go and request it with ILL to go and route it to a scanning center, scan it, and put it up online, or loan it if it's still under copyright. We need help in selection, where people will take particular subject areas and say, I'm going to nail this one. What does it take to be critical mass in British novels or newspapers of the Midwest, or anyway, whatever it is, the subject area that you're trying to do. There's an offer on the table of free microfilm equipment and back-end processing to drop a cost to zero in return for labor. So that's an opportunity that I hope more organizations take up. And try linking to the openlibrary.org. If there's one web page for every book, let's go and start to build links to it. It'll build traffic, it'll build importance, it'll build that's the place to go and put information about books. So, in closing, carved above the door of the Carnegie Library in Pittsburgh is free to the people. Thank you very much. Do we have time for questions?
So I want to, well, thank you for setting this vision. It's such a great way to start this conference. And you asked such important questions that it's just really exciting. And I want to ask you a couple tough questions, if that's okay.
Okay, after all that nice saying, now you're allowed. Go ahead.
The first question is, when you read in the paper that Reed Elsevier is getting interested in moving out of journal publishing and moving into consumer and corporate data mining, does it interest you perhaps to find a way to build a coalition of nonprofit interest in purchasing their journal businesses? And the second question is...
What a great idea.
The second question is, what, in your estimation, is the threat of the scarcity of power availability to what you're trying to do here?
Oh, like power, like electricity? Okay. So what about some of these large... Yeah, I read about they're trying to basically know everything about everything you ever do. This stuff is just freaking frightening to me. One thing I've learned is IP addresses are personally identifiable. And get rid of your IP addresses. So just or do a one-way hash that expires every day. Basically reset the seed every day, and so that you can still do some amount of analysis and the like, but you can't correlate it back to a person. Please throw the stuff away. We get actually approached by those men in black for more times than you'd kind of hope a library would. But when we say we don't have it, we don't know what people did, we don't know what people read, they go away. It's great. It's a very short conversation. So anyway, so on the Reed Elsevier going and trying to buy up, I think it was Choice Point, was a little frightening. Okay, but that wasn't your question. It was, is there an opportunity to go and buy up some of these holdings? There are. And I think some of those services, I don't know if they're making money anymore. But as they start making money, that the price will start coming down. There is an organization, Public Resource, Carl Malamud's thing, to try to get government documents. And he's negotiating to get case law from those sorts of organizations for just a few $1 million, which I think makes all the sense in the world. But until then, I think we'll have to just keep scanning along. And on the power issue, yeah, our biggest constraint right now in our data centers is power. And we're spending about $30,000 a month on power. So it's kind of painful, and it also doesn't feel good. So, and there's been a lot of greenwashing. Even though our machines are very power efficient, you'd think that all these computers use no power if you read Intel and AMD's advertising literature. It's just not true. And these guys aren't actually coming down as fast as... but is there a shortage of power? At least not at our scale, what we're doing. But yeah, be power sensitive when you're building your data centers. Yes?
So this archive you have is only good as long as your disks keep spinning.
Yeah.
What about like 1,000 years from now when we're all dead and
Hey, speak for yourself.
And archaeologists want to come back and find this stuff. Is there any progress being made on making stuff in the digital world some way accessible in the physical world?
Well, there's how do you make things last thousands of years? There's some different approaches. There's the Rosetta Project, which is sort of carve it on stone, but really, really small, and sort of have that live. And that I was involved in that project, and I think it's a terrific one. I think the real way to have long-term preservation is to have perpetual access. Access drives preservation. And if you put things away and make a dark archive, I think that's one of the worst ideas ever, the dark archive. Because if you put it away for a generation and they bring it back out, it's going to be as if it's another language. People will just study it as an academic interest. Keep it in the flow. So we're really organized towards having institutions that are up for keeping things moving forward. We have to replace our machines every 3 years. We're hoping 5 years in this next generation. But that's how long, because based on the commercial viability, to keep a couple petabytes spinning. We tried tape. God, they're awful. Man. And they're not very reliable. I think the reason why people think they're so great is because they write them and they put them in the closet and they think that they can read them back. But if you've ever tried to read them back, they don't come back. Anyway, they're very faulty. So I think keep it in activity, keep it in multiple people's hands. At the scale we are, I'm not sure that we're going to have 100 of ours, but if we had 5 copies of us and also 5 copies of them in us, if there are 5 sort of organizations kind of like us doing big back-end services, then I could sleep.
One more question.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a great vision. As a developer in libraries now, it's sometimes frustrating. You the e-text you've already got, there doesn't seem to be any way a machine API to search the indexes, so I can integrate that into my own software. And I think that would be a good way to accomplish the stuff you're talking about multiple ways of access and leveraging us to provide those. If you can provide that, it would be really helpful.
Okay. So let's take the text.
How electronically accessible is it now, and it's not accessible enough, right? So let me see if I can address that a little bit. Right now, we've got bulk access that you can do. So with OAI, you can find all the books in particular subject areas or specific collections, be able to find them, be able to automate a script to go and download the original images. There's OCR in several different formats So you can go and use those in several XML formats so that, it's trying to be really useful. Downloadable PDFs, deja vus when we can get the deja vu thing to work. And so there's a lot of the bulk access I think we're doing okay on. But even people are struggling with OAI. So anyway, but if it's, I think we're there. The Open Library project, well, the Internet Archive has some search interface, but only on the metadata, but not based on the contents of the materials.
But it's not a software interface. It's just an HTML.
Oh yeah, there's software interfaces. So let us know. And there's ways of going and getting XML versions of all of those pages. So you can do web services on top of the Internet Archive site. The Open Library site is meant to basically keep this whole project moving forward so that, and actually either site, archive.org or Open Library, you can use LCCN or OCLC number if it happens to have it. Well, we haven't gotten the deal going yet with OCLC to get all of the OCLC numbers matched up with the already digitized materials. But sometimes a lot of the MARC records that we have came from OCLC originally because we got them from the libraries. But so then it might have OCLC. Anyway, we're interested in putting every different kind of identifier, making it accessible in every different way. And if you're frustrated enough, please come and help.
Thank you very much.